Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone to our council meeting on Monday, February 24th. I will begin this afternoon with our Indigenous Territorial Acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather, land on which we are broadcasting from today, is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinootan people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. And just a side personal note, I'm partway through Tanya Talegda's most recent book, The Knowing, and it is an extremely insightful book that she's done some of the research that links some of the people involved with Hudson's Bay Company and the residential schools to the slave trade, in the Caribbean. It was, anyway, it's to say that I'm learning a lot is an understatement. So thank you to her for continuing to do the research and the writing so that people like myself can better educate myself. So a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And just another brief moment of reflection. We're towards the end, nearly the end of Black History Month, and I just want to again acknowledge the work that our local Canadian Caribbean Association of Waterloo Region and the Congress of Black Women and other groups have put into organizing numerous Black History Month events, and including at Mount Zion Church yesterday, there was their 20th anniversary that they've been hosting a Black History Month service at the church, and it's an absolutely wonderful service. But then there's a meal that Councillor Wright and I and other elected officials from across the region were there to serve this absolutely delicious meal. But it was a real couple of hours of just celebration, and it was a fantastic event. So I want to thank them and the church for continuing this tradition for about 20 years now. Okay, so moving on, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing none, approval of the minutes from the previous meetings. Do I have a mover? Councillor Wright, seconder. Councillor Rowe, all in favor? That is carried. The consent motion or consent items. So I know that there's myself. I have some questions I wanted to pull. I'd indicated that I wanted to pull item 7A, the drinking water annual and summary report. Anything else, Council, that you want to pull? Councillor Bodley.
I'm hoping to pull 7C just to make a comment and ask a quick question.
Okay, we'll do that. Any objections to that? Okay, so we'll pull those two reports, and then that leaves us the demolition control summary. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Wright, moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Freeman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Councillor Bodley, do you want to go first?
Excuse me, and I see the team heading to the desk there. So this is on the Speed Management 2025 update report. Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to, I guess, comment/highlight that in the report it speaks to the implementation costs to date so far as being almost $112,000 below the estimate for a total cost thus far of $187,000-ish. And I was hoping that staff could maybe speak to what maybe is causing it to be quite a bit lower than we had anticipated, and if the trend sort of continues as we implement this next year in Ward 1 and 3, how will those funds sort of be redirected?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bodley, you are correct, the project has been under budget so far. There's a couple reasons that could have contributed to the project being below budget. One of the things is that we had some additional traffic staff join our team through the 2024 budget cycle. The original cost estimate only considered 2 traffic staff implementing signage. Another factor could be the original cost estimate considered that we would have to install a speed sign, an area tab, and then a begins or ends tab. We were able to work with the manufacturer to have it all installed onto one sheet, which decreased cost and decreased implementation time. The remaining funding will be used for either infill signs after we complete the project or towards other road safety initiatives.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to move it if there are no other questions.
Are there other questions from staff? So it's moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, staff. And just take a quick minute to again recognize the amount of work that staff have done on this. Thank you very much. Again, it's speeding, and that is remains one of the highest issues that people contact council and likely staff themselves about. So, and that's been consistent for years, decades probably. So I think it's a tribute to former councillor who initiated this process, but also to Councillor Bodley for his leadership on doing a lot of the research and the legwork that went into this to get us where we are today. And we're starting to see the results. So thanks very much. So moving back to the drinking water report, just a couple of questions that that I had about this, and thanks council for indulging me with this, and certainly if anyone else has any questions. Hi. Actually, why don't I start with council? Did anyone else have any questions about the drinking water report? Okay, thanks. I just wanted to, sorry, I'm just scrolling to my questions here. So, okay. One of the questions is actually about the 10-year average water consumption. I was just curious, because it noted that there's a reduction in 2020 and 2021, and then a significant increase in 2022. Could you just explain what that was? Was some of that the COVID and then population growth, or what accounts for that dip and then sudden increase?
To the mayor, yes. So we would attribute a lot of that to the reduction in industrial usage in our large commercial users. During the COVID period, when we analyzed some of that data, we had probably about half of the number of large commercial users and industrial users during the 2020 to 2022 periods. And then as operations returned to normal as we came out of the pandemic, those numbers started to increase. And of course, the population growth has been percentages higher in the last 2 years, where we saw population percentages of, under 1% growth during COVID, and then post that jumping up towards 4 to 5% based on the region population estimates. So that, of course, accounts for the number of, quite a bit of additional consumption, especially with things like the universities, and that going back to regular students or increased student usage too.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. And just on the population growth, because we heard a great deal and we continue to hear a great deal. I mean, we know that the population in Waterloo, I think from 2016, it was 125,000, and now we're up in 2024. The population is noted at 160,000. So that's a tremendous amount of growth in a pretty short period of time. Just wondering if you could provide some of your advice or recommendations or information around sort of the state of the water system and our ability to provide the water that's needed. Like, do we have enough capacity for the type of growth that we're seeing? Do you have any sort of concerns that you'd want to raise with us at this point?
To you, Mayor. Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think the growth in our region area is continuing to go up, and there will be a lot of pressures, I'd say, into the next decade and beyond. And right now, the region is in the midst of the water supply strategy project, and that's really looking at what sources do we have, what supplies do we have, and what are our growth-related targets. So how much do we need? And I think, in speaking to people around the region area, I think there is, some low level of concern that, water supplies are, may not be as robust as we hope. And I think that's related to climate change as well, just some of the hydrogeological impacts. I don't think there's a great concern with hydrogeological impacts, groundwater meaning. And that concern is really about looking at supplies and where do we look for water? And I think you've heard about the pipeline that is, that's kind of the backup to the region area, the pipeline down to Lake Erie. But that's a multi-billion-dollar project. I think I worked on the original water supply master plan for the region in 2015. And at that time, the pipeline was projected at $500 million. And I'd say now it's probably closer. It's between 1 and 2, maybe even above. I don't know. It hasn't been cost estimated. So that's a big concern. So I think what we need to do in the region area going forward is really looking at, well, is there something else we can do? And I think you may be aware of what's happening in Southwest US and water reuse, like essentially one water strategies. So do we need drinking water supply for everything that we do in a community? And I think that's where we need to go, just to make sure we have the resilience of water supply and we have enough for growth. So yeah, really, really good question in terms of where do we need to go as a region?
Thanks very much. Did you call it a one water supply? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so we're in the industry. It's called a one water strategy, and it's saying, hey, water. We just need to think about water and where do we use water? Where does it go? What are the uses? How do we get it? And we could look at wastewater reuse. We could look at stormwater recapture. We could look at rainwater harvest strategies. And there's actually some of that going on in the region already. So stormwater harvest, buildings that are using rainwater for some of their, let's say, toilets and other uses within a building. So that's pretty exciting, and I think we need to really capitalize on that and come up with a strategy. So I'd say stay tuned. I think we're going to have some things to chat about over the next year, and we've definitely flagged that to the region that we as area municipalities want to be part of that, because it's not a region. Some of that's not region specific. It's actually the cities and the townships should be taking on some of that strategy. So.
Thanks for raising that. That's, it just really underscores, because as council here and certainly as council at the region, we are the owners of the water system. And so it's a really significant responsibility we have as elected officials to ensure that the water supply, you do the work, but to make sure that you have what you need to make sure the water supply is being properly tested and cleaned, and that there's going to be capacity for now and for the future. So, that we'll look forward to learning more about the One Water strategy when that comes forward, because I think you're absolutely right. This is something that we need to really keep an eye on, because in a community like ours with that's 80% groundwater, we need to be it's a real delicate balance on how much we're taking and finding from the groundwater, how much we're taking from the Grand River, how much we're able to treat and reuse, but then as our growth continues, I think that's part of why I think Waterloo's strategy for growing in and up and using the available parcels of land within our community rather than sprawling out is really smart. It's better for our water supply, and it's also better for the cost. Because as you said, this is costly infrastructure to build, because everybody needs water, whether it's industrial, commercial, residential. And just on that, you mentioned climate change. Just on that, what should council and yourself as staff be considering in response to climate change? And we're going to have increased water pressures. That's no pun. We're actually, no pun intended. We're going to have increased pressure on our water system because of our growth. But then we know that there's, maybe with climate change, the source water may be harder to find. There's more challenge and on the pipes and the system and the underground infrastructure as well. So I'm just wondering if you could kind of give us a sense of like what we should be thinking about because we know that these challenges are coming down the road.
To you, Mayor. Yeah, again, very good question, because I think, climate change is there's a lot of different impacts from climate change. And I think in terms of our actual water supplies here in the region area, right now, things look, pretty good. We have the reservoir is very stable in the upper watershed, so the GRCA takes care of a number of the reservoirs in the upper part of the like north of the region area, and those continue to supply at least the surface water. Groundwater, looks to be reasonably stable, but if we went through a prolonged period of let's say reduced precipitation, we could see some impacts on the hydrogeological supply. So the groundwater could be maybe a little bit harder to access. So that really points to that long-term strategy, the water supply strategy that the region's doing, to say, well, if we don't have enough supply in the core area within the current well supplies, so do we need new wells? Do we need alternative supplies? And that's capital dollars. If we think about the one water strategy to take away some of the supply that could be used by an industry, as an example, for evaporative cooling, maybe we can provide a different water supply for evaporative cooling. Maybe that's from stormwater or wastewater. And that allows us to now have more drinking water available for growth or even to meet the core demands. So, but that all takes capital. So we're talking about potentially new pipe systems, new treatment systems, more remote wastewater or more remote water supply locations, perhaps in the townships, perhaps in different parts of the cities. So I think at the end of the day, it could be a question of greater capital that's needed for these supplies, and that's operating, and that could be a combination of region and area municipality, so us as a city, costs, and more management of all of that water supply and water network. Within the city, we're very confident about the distribution system and our ability to get water out to all of our customers, but the supply is obviously not 100% in our control, so we need to work with the region on that.
Yeah. And I mean, a really good point that you raised about the people who are built, like new development that's coming online, whatever kind, commercial, industrial, residential, we probably need to look at, I mean, I guess it's a building code thing, but look at, systems that those developers are including in their buildings that are water recapture and to use gray water and things like that. So I think that's pretty important for us to keep in mind when we're talking to developers about what they're doing to address that, because there is a finite supply of it. But yeah, and then where we can conserve it, I think the more the better. Thank you very much. And just my last quick question is for communications, because we know there's a lot of people, some of who are new to our city, who who maybe don't understand that our water system is really high quality. It's tested. I don't know how many times it's tested, but it's tested. Maybe Jacqueline, you can tell us how many times an hour it's tested.
It's not necessarily broken down per hour, but distributionally, we do. We take over about 3,600 samples between looking for bacteria and to ensure proper disinfectant levels. And then at the regional level, they are taking samples for disinfectant and other parameters every 5 minutes. So that accounts for over 100,000 samples a year on your source water, and then an additional 1,600 bacteriological testing that they do before it leaves the plants, so, or any of the reservoirs. So it is significant.
That's incredible. And so the point is that our drinking water that comes right out of our tap, which is a municipal service, is very high quality, it's low cost, it's tested, but there still are quite a few people who, I think some of them who are newer to the community maybe don't, from other parts in the world where the water supply isn't as safe. And so I'm just wondering if there's work that we could do through our social media campaigns, or if we've done social media campaigns to just remind people or to let them know like the quality of the water that we have here, the quality of the system, the work that Jacqueline and Lee and the team do. And so buying bottled water is expensive, but really is unnecessary. So I don't know if you've run any of campaigns like that or could just take that as a takeaway.
Thanks, Mayor. I can confirm that it is part of our water promotional strategy throughout the year. I just can't confirm if that started, the piece specific to drinking water has run yet or not, but I know they've been working on a number of promotional things, including some videos that they'll be able to link to. So that is
Okay.
definitely part of the campaign.
Okay, that's great, because, yeah, like I said, our water here, and municipal water is, it's one of the services that people pay for through their property tax system, and it's top quality. Obviously, staff are highly qualified, and it's one of the, I mean, everything we do at the municipality is really important, but safe drinking water is right up at the top there in terms of the important things that municipalities do. So thank you very much for the report and for the work that you do, and for council allowing me to pull it from consent so I could ask those questions. Thanks so much, Jacqueline and Lee, really appreciate it. So just looking for on those two reports, a mover and a seconder to accept them, for moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Wright. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to staff reports. The first one is parking reductions for affordable housing. We have Adam Zuflery, sorry, Adam. And there's a presentation with this, so we'll turn it over to you, Adam. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of council. Planning staff are bringing forward a report to approve the parking reductions for affordable housing guidelines, which are intended to simplify the planning approvals process for affordable housing providers. This item is a part of initiative number 8 from the City of Waterloo's Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan, together with other initiatives from the action plan. Parking reductions for affordable housing aims to facilitate more affordable housing construction in Waterloo. The city has the power to enter into parking reduction agreements with registered owners of land through Section 40 of the Planning Act. The city has previously used parking reduction agreements with several affordable housing developments. The Director of Planning has delegated authority to enter into these parking reduction agreements. Planning and legal services staff have prepared a template of a parking reduction agreement to be used in the future, and staff have also prepared an application submission form, which will be made available on the city's website should council approve this report. The supporting documents will help to expedite the approval process for affordable housing providers. The city's official plan defines affordable housing as a unit of housing for which the annual accommodation costs, meaning the monthly mortgage costs or monthly rent, do not exceed 30% of the household income for low and moderate income households. Or the affordable housing is defined as housing for which the purchase price is 10% below the average market price, or for which the average rent is at or below the CMHC average market rent for the regional market area, being Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge. The CMHC identified the average market rent of a 2-bedroom to be $1,776 in 2024. Affordable housing providers are considered eligible to receive parking reductions. Providers of affordable housing include nonprofit housing developers, municipal governments such as the city or region, and the third sector, which generally refers to groups operating outside of the public or private sectors, such as religious institutions or charities. Planning staff have prepared the parking reductions for affordable housing guidelines to provide certainty and clarity to affordable housing providers as to what types of development shall be considered for parking reductions. The criteria are as follows. A minimum of 25% affordable housing shall be in the development. Affordable housing that is provided shall be maintained as affordable for a minimum duration of 25 years, and that the development continue to provide accessible and visitor parking in accordance with the required amount in the zoning bylaw. The Director of Planning maintains the authority to grant parking reductions to affordable housing providers and may consider doing so for projects which do not meet these criteria exactly, if it is determined that doing so would be in the public interest. In such cases, the housing provider would be expected to provide rationale as to why they are unable to satisfy the criteria. Further discussion about the proposed guidelines is included within the report. Staff are recommending that council approve report IPPW 2025-005, and that council approve the parking reductions for affordable housing guidelines attached as Appendix A to report IPPW 2025-005. And that concludes my presentation. Myself and Joel are available for questions.
Thank you very much, Adam. So council, do you have some questions? We'll start with Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to clarify where this will have the largest impact, because with our major transit station area zones, we already have reduced requirements for parking, no parking minimums. And while also considering the importance of accessibility of transit, I mean like geographic accessibility of transit, I'm just wondering where this particular set of recommendations will have the biggest impact.
Through the mayor to Councillor Wright, you are correct in your understanding that the major transit station areas per provincial legislation are no longer subject to the minimum parking requirements in our zoning bylaw. So the areas where this will have the greatest impact are areas outside of the major transit station areas, specifically in some of our nodes and corridors, as identified in the city's official plan. Parking reductions will likely have the greatest impact for multifamily housing type developments, and affordable housing is more likely to come in some sort of multifamily form, whether that be townhouses or apartments, and will likely have the greatest impact in our nodes and corridors where those types of residential uses are permitted.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Councillor Wright. Other questions from council? No? Oh, sorry, did you have a question, Councillor Bodley? Oh, okay. Just curious if you could explain the rationale for the 25 years versus a longer period of time.
To the mayor, the rationale for having a minimum criteria for a 25-year affordability period is alignment with the city's inclusionary zoning policy, and also to provide some level of flexibility both to the director and to the affordable housing provider. With the cost of construction rising, affordable housing development is becoming even more challenging as grant funding has to increase correspondingly. And as a result, providers are looking to have some level of flexibility within how affordable housing is delivered in the future. Ideally, it would be the case that affordable units are secured for longer terms, but the rationale for the minimum criteria of 25 years is alignment with inclusionary zoning.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Okay, seeing no further questions, then Councillor Bodley is will move it, and seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on that. The next agenda item is the Government of Canada Active Transportation Fund, City of Waterloo grant application. And we have, oh, sorry. Did I skip one? Oh, sorry. Sorry, turned the page too soon, sorry. 155 Caroline Street, amending agreement for Iron Horse Trail, but we do have Chris Hodgson here. Thank you, Chris, for coming. So there is a report with this. Council, do you have some questions of staff around this? Wow, no one's got any questions today. Okay. Pardon? Okay, we've got a mover, and moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Vasek. All in favor? Okay, we're good to go. But we'll keep you in place there, Chris, because the next item is the Government of Canada Active Transportation Fund for the City of Waterloo grant application. Again, there's 4 recommendations here. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, we're a quiet group today. Okay, moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor? That is carried. You got off the hook today, Chris. Well done. We're moving right along here. Okay, property acquisition, 250 Lincoln Road. There's a report here, but Justin McFadden is joining us. And there's a recommendation. There's no presentation with this. And we do have, sorry, I'm just looking for the delegate list. Here we go. So Justin, did you have any comments or questions to start off, or can we just go to the delegates? Okay. All right. So the first delegate is Philip Ellsworthy, resident of Waterloo. Welcome, Philip. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Philippe Ellsworthy, and I live in the city of Waterloo. I was looking through the council packet last night and was surprised to come across this item, the acquisition of 250 Lincoln Road. And I'm in favor of the city acquiring the property and certainly in favor of building housing on it. But when it got to the part where the church was proposed to be demolished, I became slightly alarmed. I think that the church itself is important for a couple of reasons. The first is the association with the architects Horton and Ball, who were among a small group of post-war modern architects that built quite a bit in the KW, and their praises have been sung by Rick Haldenby, the former director of the School of Architecture. Horton and Ball, you might know, was also the architect of the library main branch. So there's that. But the second reason is the association with Nancy Lou Patterson and her husband Palmer, who moved to Waterloo in 1962, and St. Columba was their church for all their lives. Nancy, they both came to Waterloo to take up teaching positions at U of W, and Nancy Lou Patterson was the founder of the Fine Arts Department at U of W, and received many honors and awards throughout her career for her outstanding, particularly her outstanding liturgical artwork. She was quite an influential artist, and I believe had a profound effect on a generation of graduates from the U of W Fine Arts Department. So she was responsible for the stained glass windows in St. Columba Church, I believe some interior carving, and a multitude of hangings and other textiles. The hangings were quilted or made of felt, and they suited this modern style of the church. I was at St. Columba a couple of times, once when it was on the Doors Open tour in 2018, and I believe a second time for Nancy Lou's celebration of life, I think, which was later that year. So there's some significance to that building itself, and so I'm here really to recommend that the council ask for a cultural heritage evaluation report on the church.
Okay.
That's-
Thanks very
that's
much.
it.
Is that's
Have
it?
I used my 5 minutes?
Okay, all right. Council, does anyone have any questions of the delegate? Of staff, okay, there'll be questions about what you've raised there of staff. Thanks very much, Philippe. And the next delegate is Kay Elgie, also a resident of Waterloo. Welcome, Kay.
So as I emailed council and staff last night, I had similar concerns to Philip. And I have since learned, as I also updated you, that a number of the textile and movable pieces have been transferred to another church. So I don't have that same concern. But I did want, and I have learned some other things about the building and realized that it could be challenging to reuse it. But I did want to particularly advocate for a solution that I know the congregation would love to see for this property, and that is that they would like it to be a community meeting place, a community center. And I know that's part of the recommendation for arts and so on. But I would like to really push for this, because this is a long-standing wish of mine ever since we moved the Adult Recreation Center to the Memorial Recreation Complex. And I think it would be much wiser if Waterloo started to decentralize these community centers. I know that community has a number of senior clients because they'll shovel snow for at least 3 of them, you know, and increasingly, and I see friends of mine who are no longer able to drive. There's no transit to the rec complex. So I think this would be an opportunity to start doing that, even if it's just a community meeting place, maybe a couple of offices or something. But to start decentralizing, more like what Kitchener has done, I think that's a much better model for this city. So I wish to push that opportunity forward when you're considering what to do with the building.
Thank you very much, Kay. And there is a question from Councillor Bassick.
It's a comment through you, Mayor. Thank you. So I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to chat with you, Kay. So one of the reasons I ran for council was because I worked for Pathways to Education. It's a program in Kitchener, and it runs out of community centers, and it helps teenagers to get more kids from low-income neighborhoods to graduate high school, and then make it easier for them to go on to post-secondary with financial bursaries and other support to do the application process, et cetera. So I'm familiar with the Kitchener model, and actually one of the reasons why I ran for council was exactly to hopefully do this, because Moses Springer is there. There's a very small room in addition to the one ice rink. The kitchen isn't usable by the community, and so it's been a hope of mine to get a community space there. And originally I was looking with Elizabeth Clark, who was the regional councillor at the time. We had a couple of back and forth exchanges about, turning maybe one of the townhomes into a community space like they do in Kitchener. And one of the concerns that was raised along the way was, well, it's really tough to take housing out of the housing stock right now, even though a community use is worthwhile, because we really need the housing stock. And so this is all to say that this is a big dream of mine, to have it as a community space as well. I don't think this is the time where we get to choose that, but I'll have a question for staff after about how the public can get involved in that. So one, and then the second piece, sorry for all this time, but the second piece is that what's so beautiful about how this recommendation came about is that at first the city had no idea that this was potentially going to be up for sale. It was through a resident who I know who reached out to me and said, hey, we've been doing all of these consultations. Did you know that they're possibly selling? We'd really love a community, and specifically a community arts space in the neighborhood. And that launched just a series of conversations to where we are today. And so I think what's beautiful about this is if there is a community space at some point in there, the ask really came from the community itself as well. It's not only my dream. And so anyway, so thank you for advocating for that and indulging me in sharing the background I'm excited about.
Thank you, Councillor Bassick. Is there any other comments? So seeing none, thanks very much, Kay, and thank you both for always staying very on top of what's happening at local council. It really is appreciated. At least we know someone's watching and paying attention. We do appreciate the time that you take to do that. So moving along then, Councillor Bassick, I think you said you did have some questions of staff? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, one is about the proposed interim use space, and I understand it's largely supposed to be used for arts and creative industries, but the third recommendation does say that it could also be used for other city programs. So I was just hoping you could help us understand what other city programs that might be and what the likelihood is that those would be used there as well.
Through you, Councillor, to the Mayor. or through the mayor to you, I guess. Yeah, so we would be going through a full kind of our EOI process to populate the space. We do have a lot of really good information that indicates there is a strong demand for arts and creative space. And so that would be kind of at least at this moment in time, the initial lens is to provide that. And then the expectation would be that if there's not full demand for arts and creative space, then we would sort of look at other spaces. Obviously, we're willing to adjust that strategy, but that's kind of the thinking at this point based on kind of the directions that we've had.
Super, that's good. And then my second question is, maybe you can speak about the community space element, but this is maybe for you, but likely for Joel. One of the potential things that's going to happen is that whatever happens on this site, there may need to be an official plan amendment or a zoning bylaw amendment. So, and the surrounding community will be, I'm sure, keen to get involved in that, both regarding the residential portion, but also any potential community use of space or commercial use of space. So when this goes public and when we share it more widely, people may have the question of, well, are you going to build a building? People have already actually asked about that. So what is, and I'm not suggesting that's a good or a bad idea, it's just when planning matters come, those kind of questions come and people that kind of change elicits those questions. So how will people be able to be involved in that process down the road should that unfold?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. Certainly any planning application is an open process where the community can provide feedback. Certain types of applications, such as official plan or zoning amendments, have very direct community engagement requirements where we engage the community through public meetings and other venues. When it comes to matters such as site plan, those are typically dealt with by staff, but the public is welcome to comment on those processes as well. So as we move through any type of use on a city property, we take extra diligence and care to make sure the community is consulted with respect to any planning applications. Thank you.
Super, thank you so much. And my last is regarding the heritage. As Kay mentioned, she reached out this morning and so did another resident over the weekend. So I did a little bit of searching with staff, and my understanding is it is not included from the first phase of the cultural heritage landscape study, and the building itself doesn't, there's not a strong sense that it would be a heritage site, the actual building itself, maybe some elements of it. So one, I want to understand if I am understanding staff right when they've said that to me, or if I'm missing something, so if you could elaborate on that. And then two, I am wondering how, I have two thoughts for moving forward. One is I would like your perspective on Phil's suggestion to ask for a cultural heritage evaluation report, which would require some more work from staff. I'm willing to entertain that idea and also have conversation around the council table about that. The thing that I was going to ask if staff might be able to do before Phil made that suggestion was if we could note it in the file to have a municipal heritage planner and somebody from the Municipal Heritage Committee do a site visit before demolition to see if any pieces from the building or inside the building ought to be salvaged for future use. So that's what I was going to suggest, but I'm curious about your perspective on that, as well as your perspective on Phil's suggestion to do the full report.
Who wants to start on that? Joel?
I will.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. With respect to the process of if there is a decision to demolish the structure, to have somebody from staff and any other body that we deem appropriate to review the property from a heritage perspective, identify items that may be appropriate for salvage. Happy to do that. That's a common practice that we have with many structures that we have or believe may have some sort of heritage significance or architectural significance. With respect to the Property itself, it's not identified within the cultural heritage landscape. It wasn't identified by our heritage consultant. It's not listed or designated on the Municipal Heritage Register. So we're in council's hands. If you would like us to engage in any type of heritage review as part of any type of application that comes for us, we can certainly do that if that's council's wishes. But certainly when we do any type of review, we do review properties from all different types of lenses. And if we believe there is a heritage aspect to this, we would certainly look at it from a heritage perspective.
And then that also sparked that phase 1 and phase 2 of the cultural heritage landscape study is also supposed to be forthcoming from the budget anyways. I'm not sure, given all of the planning changes, if that's changed. So I guess I'm wondering if we wanted to have a better understanding, would it be better coming through, adding this as something to look through the second or third phase of the cultural heritage landscape project, or would it be better to have a more formalized evaluation report?
Through your Mayor McCabe to Councillor Vassic, depending on the timing of the next phases of the cultural heritage landscape study, we could integrate it in, provided that the focus of that study made sense to do that type of integration. In this case, we would be happy to work with Justin's group if he can acquire the property, determine kind of next steps and time frames for land uses. We're happy to work with economic development on evaluating the property at the appropriate time.
And is that a direction you can take back, or does that require a council direction?
I think I'll turn to our clerk to respond to that.
Subject to Joel feeling otherwise, it sounds like it would be fairly standard in our processes for any property we own in any event with demolition. So I don't believe it's necessary unless staff and council would prefer to have that on the record.
I think it would be look to you, Councillor Vassic, if you think. If you feel comfortable with what Mr. Cotter's outlined,
Yeah.
or, I mean, we can pause that for now because I know there's a couple other people with questions, but you can think about it if you want, or.
I think right now I'm quite comfortable with those two things. One, I think if it's standard to have staff and someone from the committee to walk around, that's one thing I'd like to see. And then, but I guess that would happen through a more formal report. So if that's possible and doesn't require a council direction unless others would like one, and doesn't add substantially to the workload, I think let's go ahead and do that. That's my perspective, but I'll let others.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything to add to any of our questions, Councillor Vassic's questions, Justin, or?
The only thing I was going to add is that, and we can confirm with our facilities folks, but our understanding is that the St. Columba folks have removed the stained glass and all of the art from the facility, or their plan is to have it removed before we would take possession. So that part of it, I know there was some questions about that and comments about that. That part we believe has been taken care of.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. And I guess the other question I have just related to that is, in the process, as Mr. Cotter just outlined, if, I'm forgetting your name, the director of our city museum would be involved in some of that as well, just to have a walkthrough to identify what's significant for the city, or from a cultural heritage perspective as well. Correct? Like, she would be involved with that, Karen Vanderbrink?
We can certainly invite her. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the information. And I think it's really exciting to see another space for the community. And so while I'm looking at the report and I understand the acquisition piece and the long-term affordable housing, I just wanted to ask a question just further to Councillor Vassic's about the use of space and the REOI. And I'm wondering if, I'm just looking for a little bit more information. Justin, I know we touched on this before in another conversation, and maybe just what the vision or the plan is for the space, because I'm trying to visualize what that could look like.
So actually Estero's here, so maybe I'll ask Estero to, she'll be the one that'll be sort of curating the space, so maybe she can talk a little bit about that.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Rowe, because this acquisition is unbudgeted and we don't currently have a budget to administrate a new facility,
Our plans initially are to include this as part of the Meanwhile Spaces program that we are working on in collaboration with Arts Build Ontario. So initially, our thoughts would be that we put out an REOI to the arts community, similar to the one that has gone out for Wing 404. That process closed last week. We had 31 responses from the community. So I think initially we would like to use a similar process and work with Arts Build. There are some significant limitations to this space in terms of accessibility, which may limit how it's used. So we want to use something like the REOI process to ensure that we can kind of maximize the space and make it available to as many organizations or individuals as possible within the limitations of the building.
Awesome, thank you. And so then, just to follow up, will that come back to council through a briefing note or something, just so that we understand then how the final decision on how the space will be used will be shared?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Rowe, certainly we can do a briefing note.
That would be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowe. Any other questions, council, on this decision? I think just, so thanks very much. The only comment I would make, oh, sorry, did you have something else? Oh, okay, she's excited to move it. I would just, I'm channeling Councillor Freeman and her budget chair, but just to say that we're cognizant of the fact that anything that we bring online like this, should we decide in a few minutes to go forward with this, there are operating costs, as we've just heard, that come along with this as well, and we need to obviously be really mindful of that because it's an additional pressure on the budget, but we also know we're balancing that with we know the need for cultural spaces is really great in Waterloo as well. So it's a real balancing act, but I think this is an important opportunity for us and for the community. So with that, if there's no other comments or questions, I'll ask for someone to move, the Councillor Vasic to move the recommendations, seconded by Councillor Roach. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, staff, for the work you did on this opportunity that kind of came to us unexpectedly. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, we're going to welcome staff member Dominic Simpson and Hayden Bulbrook from TMHC. It's a notice of intention to designate multiple properties under the Ontario Heritage Act, Part 1. Okay, so welcome, Dominic. I know you have a presentation, so over to you.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Dominic Simpson. I'm a senior policy planner with our community planning team. And with me here today is Hayden Bulbrook, our heritage consultant from TMHC Inc. So we're here to speak to staff report IPPW 2025-006, which is a notice of intention to designate multiple properties under the Ontario Heritage Act, or OHA, which is Part 1. So just a brief presentation outline here. I'll keep going as we have a lot to cover. So here's the project background, but I guess to start off, I want to acknowledge that on February 10th, our staff from the museum had a presentation titled Landmarks and Landscapes, which is a really great segue into this presentation. As seen through that presentation, Waterloo has a rich history, and that's really the intent of what heritage planning is for, is to celebrate and preserve that rich history that Waterloo has, preserve that integrity and sense of place of Waterloo, and share it with future generations. So where this all started was through Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, which was proclaimed on January 1st, 2023. And I'm sure we're all very familiar with Bill 23 and its many changes, but one of them was to the Ontario Heritage Act, which impacts Waterloo's Municipal Heritage Register. Waterloo's Heritage Register, as you may be aware, has a list of all the designated properties in the city, but it also has a list of non-designated properties of cultural heritage value, referred to as listed properties. So there's approximately 150 listed properties on the register, and municipalities traditionally list properties on the register to provide them with interim protection from demolition until they're reviewed in a more comprehensive manner and designated potentially. Bill 23 requires the delisting or removal of those listed properties from the register if the municipality doesn't issue a notice of intent to designate that property by January 1st, 2025, which was later extended to January 1st, 2027 by Bill 200. But initially, in response to this legislation, staff, with support from our Municipal Heritage Committee, created a short list of 46 properties to be prioritized for review. And at that point, we retained TMHC Inc. to support us with that work. So this report before you, as mentioned, constitutes part 1 and addresses 14 properties of those 46 shortlisted properties. And it's important to note that all these properties have been evaluated against Ontario Regulation 906, or OREG 906, which is the provincial standard tool, the main criteria for determining whether a property has cultural heritage value or interest, and whether it can be designated and protected under the Ontario Heritage Act. So again, all these properties have been reviewed against this criteria in close detail. And in order for a property to be designated, it must meet 2 or more of the 9 criteria, generally categorized into design or architectural significance, historical significance, or contextual significance, such as it being a landmark in the neighborhood. And on average, the properties before you today met around 4 to 6 of the criteria, making them really strong candidates for designation. And in terms of engagement, I see it's cut off there, my apologies. But we did consult with the public through Engage Waterloo page. We conducted meetings with owners or representatives of those owners throughout 2024, and some of them are continuing into 2025. We've also conducted Indigenous consultation, internal staff, and of course, our Heritage Committee have been involved in this project since its beginning. I'll now turn it over to Hayden to give an overview of the properties. And just to note that this list here is numbered in order of the presentation. That's slightly different from the staff report.
All right, thank you, Dominic, and good afternoon, councillors. I'll try to keep this brief. It's going to be a brief overview of these properties that have a lot of rich history and architecture, hence why they've been part of the 14 shortlisted here. So I'm going to just present with these some photographs to kind of help with the visual engagement here. But and what will probably end up happening is we focus on a few of the 14 properties in some detail, but no less significant that all the properties here are significant. So starting with 33 Allen Street East, this is the Church of the Holy Savior, which was originally designed in 1897 by renowned Canadian architect Eden Smith. There's only one other example of his designs in Waterloo. And the historical significance here is that it expresses religious plurality, as it was Waterloo's first Anglican church in the Diocese of Huron. Moving to the next property here, this is one of the rare houses that we're looking at in the study here, and this is 39 DuPont Street East, and it's a representative example of the Berlin/Waterloo vernacular style that really is best summarized in the photos here. And it really relied on local architectural tradition and materials to shape its form. 75 Allen Street East is a property that was a building on the property originally designed by local architect Charles Mook, who was the first full-time engineer with the town of Waterloo. And the former St. Louis School is a rare example in Waterloo of Beaux-Arts architecture as a result of alterations that actually happened in 1923. The building was also purpose-built as Waterloo's first Roman Catholic school. 35 Alexandra Avenue is another school property, and again, designed by Charles Mook, this time in 1909, and it features the striking collegiate Gothic style. Again, this is a result of alterations that happened in 1923. And in this case, it was an architect who had a lot of notable experience throughout Canada, as well as in New York and Boston. And it's also where educator Elizabeth Ziegler, who served as the first female principal, had her tenure here from 1909 to 1930. 12 Bridgeport Road East saw this coming in today. It's a former industrial building with a rare U-shaped form in Uptown Waterloo. And it's since been adaptively reused, but it was designed for Valentine and Martin, which was a shoe manufacturing company that operated here for over 30 years. 187 King Street South, another notable industrial building in kind of the Uptown Waterloo area here. And it has significant historical associations with A. Bauer and Company, later Bauer Industries Limited, and the renowned Bauer family of Waterloo. And moving on to yet another industrial property, this is at 19 Regina Street North. And it was constructed in 1925 for Waterloo's textile manufacturing, but it also has a very notable history as the Royal Canadian Legion's Waterloo Branch 530 for over 60 years. Now moving into kind of the main intersection of Uptown Waterloo, this building situated at King Street North and Herb Street is a striking example of Beaux-Arts commercial architecture. And with its construction in 1925, it was the first purpose-built branch in Waterloo for the Bank of Toronto, which later became Toronto Dominion Bank. And this one here, 15 King Street North, it's known as the Conrad Black for its associations with the Conrad family. While this building wasn't constructed until 1888, Jacob Conrad Sr., who was an immigrant to Waterloo, started his business in 1864, and the family business would operate here until 1945. And this building here is 16 to 24 King Street North, the site of Waterloo's first purpose-built movie theater, which opened in 1937 and operated for over 60 years. Its unique design is attributable to actually an American-born architect, Herbert George Dewar, who would design 22 movie theaters like this in Ontario for the famous Players movie theater chain. Do you have to conclude some stuff here, or am I good to keep going?
You can keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is 2325 King Street North, and it comprises the northernmost section of a commercial block just north of Herb Street. And it was designed in 1895 in the Italianate style as a commercial building for Jacob S. Roos, who was the son of immigrants and a shoemaker in Waterloo. He actually would go on to have one of the largest custom shoemaking trades on southwestern Ontario. And then kind of moving in, this is a commercial property today, but it was originally built as a hotel in the 1850s. And it's a rare example of the Georgian style of architecture in Uptown Waterloo, and it serves as a reminder of Waterloo's early architecture. 36 to 40 King Street South is an intact and great example of Italianate architecture in Uptown Waterloo, again designed by Charles Mook. And notably, the building housed the business of Addison C. Moyer, who is considered to be the first professional photographer in Waterloo. And here we have 100 to 102 King Street South. You can see with the stone marking there, it was constructed in 1930. And it's a striking example of the Renaissance revival style that was used in this early 20th century commercial building. It's known as the Cressman Block for its association with Alvin Carter Cressman, who operated an insurance and real estate business from 1908 to 1946, and of course from 1930 onward in this building. And he did his work in English and German. So that's all I have for my brief overview, and thank you.
Thank you, Hayden. And I know we're probably at time, so I'll wrap it up quickly. But I just wanted to go over for council's benefit the designation notice and process. So should council choose to give notices of intention to designate for either of the properties presented to you today, that notice or NOID is sent to the owner, the Ontario Heritage Trust, and published on the city's website to keep the public informed. Once the notice is published, the window of objections is then open for any owners or objectors to submit letters to the city. They have 30 days from that notice. And if there are objections, council can decide to withdraw that NOID or dismiss the objection depending on what the nature of the objection is. But if there's no objections or we dismiss that objection, council can then pass a designation bylaw at a future meeting, and that must be done within 120 days of first publishing that notice of intention to designate. And then once the designation bylaw is passed by council, if there are still objections, the owners or objectors can appeal that decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And if there's no objection or no appeals rather, the bylaw becomes in full force and effect and is registered on title with the property. In terms of next steps, as seen through here, we're only addressing 14 properties, so we will be coming to council in the future to address the other properties as deemed appropriate. We're also interested in launching a future phase of heritage designations. As noted earlier, we have 150-ish listed properties, and we were only addressing a subset of that, which was originally intended to accommodate the tight timelines of January 2025 that were initially imposed by Bill 23. So there's a lot more properties that we may want to look at in future phases, which we can do over the next 2 years. So we need to get cracking on that soon. Also consistent with section 5.2 of the staff report, you'll see that we're interested in looking at financial incentive options for heritage properties. Currently, we have the Uptown Facade Improvement Grant Program, which has seen a lot of good uptake, but there are some properties that exist outside of those CIP boundaries, and we might want to look at expanding the program citywide or tweaking it in ways that benefit heritage properties in more detail. Also interested in looking at finance property tax relief for heritage properties, but again, these are things that will take some time to look into, and we're looking for council's direction to proceed with that work, as it might have financial constraints to the city. And just to conclude, I want to again highlight the importance of heritage designation. It's really about creating a sustainable community, and preserving our existing building and infrastructure is really an environmental friendly choice. These buildings enhance Waterloo's unique identity and sense of place, and our ability to manage and protect these buildings helps preserve them for future generations. And based on staff's assessment of TMHC's work and through our consultations, we are confident that the 14 properties presented to you today are eligible for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. And this last slide is just a copy paste of the recommendations from the staff report, but it's all jumbled because I guess the font didn't translate to it's okay. Happy to answer any questions council might have.
Thank you, Dominic and Hayden, for that presentation and for the information. So questions from council of staff. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. The third recommendation in your report talks about the financial incentives, and so I'm just wondering if you could walk us through that a little bit about what the scope of the work that you intend to undertake, and who that would be focused on, like in terms of your stakeholders and the property owners.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Wright, that's a great question. So the scope is broad at this point. Really, our objective for this meeting was to just inform council of our intent to initiate that process and get some buy-in on that, and then report back at a later date. I know that our economic development staff are initiating an internal review of their CIP, Community Improvement Plan program for the Uptown, and that may be a process over the next couple years. So we would want to work in tandem with them if there are changes that might come forward for heritage properties. In terms of the heritage property tax relief, it's a system set up by the province, and many municipalities have initiated that in their jurisdictions. So there is best practices out there to bring that into Waterloo. but the scope of it is to be determined at this point. I know taxes for commercial properties is a big concern, and if there's any way we can assist with that, then we want to look into that for sure.
So just as a follow-up to that, if I may, so I could conclude from that our current package of financial incentives is limited in comparison to what might be possible or might be already implemented in other communities across Ontario?
Through the mayor to Councillor Wright, I can't speak to the specifics of what other municipalities have, but the existing Uptown Facade Improvement Grant is a really great offering to owners in the Uptown area. I think it's up to $15,000 to help with renovation costs, and that's something that other municipalities don't have. So I wouldn't say that we are in a position where we don't have anything to support owners. It's just an understanding that there are heritage properties outside of the Uptown that don't have access to that funding right now. So that's something we might want to look into.
Can you clarify then what the property tax element would do?
It would be, I would have to look into my notes to refresh my memory, but essentially the province would be funding the education portion of the property taxes, and the city and region would have to figure out a way to fund the other portion of the taxes. Adam, do you have more to say?
I see Mr. Lauder. Did you want to add to that?
Sure, if I could. Yeah, the tax incentive program, for example, in the city of Toronto, where there are designated heritage properties that incur maintenance, construction costs related to maintaining the heritage property, there's a process where they can get tax relief for a portion of their construction costs. And so it's really municipal as well as educational taxes. And so that's kind of the framework that exists. It's based off of receipts. And so it's not an automatic program, but where there are construction costs, there's a process to submit those receipts, have them reviewed, and then when deemed eligible, to have some of their taxes waived to a point until they recoup those costs.
Thank you, Mr. Lauder.
Can I just clarify? So then it becomes basically a tax deferral program until they've recouped the costs?
Yeah, a deferral or a partial rebate, depending on the scope of the cost. So it could be for a particular year, if they incur those costs in the first year. Depends on what the taxes that they're paying, so it could be all or a portion of one or more years of tax waiver.
Can I just add to your questions on that? Does Heritage Canada, are there any funds through Heritage Canada for heritage properties like what you're describing?
Great question. Through you, Mayor, and perhaps Hayden could expand on this too. I'm not sure. But they might, but it may be for more nationally interested heritage properties as opposed to municipally significant heritage properties, but I would have to double check that for you. There's also the Waterloo Region Heritage Foundation that has grants that are available to heritage properties. They typically have certain windows when the funding is available. So it's limited, whereas the city's grant program is open multiple times throughout the year, is my understanding. And there are other avenues for heritage grants, but I would have to look into that.
Okay, thank you. Did you have other questions, Councillor Wright, or are there other questions from anyone?
I do have a alternate recommendation or an amendment to the existing recommendation that I'd like to propose to council.
Okay, go ahead.
So firstly, I just want to make a comment that from your presentation, the the uptown property owners, the properties that you showed us were all Ward 7 properties in the uptown core, and they've demonstrated incredible stewardship of those properties over the years. We have an uptown commercial core that is the envy of communities across Ontario. It's beautiful and vibrant, and most of our commercial businesses are occupied, or those properties are occupied by thriving tenants. And so I think that's just a nod to the energy that they have brought to Uptown. It's something that we obviously should recognize and support. What I would like to propose here is that we defer the notice of intent to designate for the commercial properties on this list, and with the rationale being that there are a series of financial incentives that you've introduced today during today's meeting that I think we could be communicating to property owners more effectively, and I think it would really help create a greater sense of awareness of the benefits of having a heritage designation. And I think it would probably go a long way to building goodwill with those property owners who have taken on the stewardship out of their own pockets to this point, and also with the help of the CIP program. So I'd just like to give us a little more time to do that outreach to the commercial property owners, and to really thank those residential property owners that are on the top 5 here who have done a beautiful job of maintaining their properties. They've done a beautiful job of stewarding them, and just give us a little more time to work through those commercial properties and ensure that they have what they need, that they understand fully what the incentive program might entail.
So do you have some language to that, or do you need it? Do you need that to capture that?
What we
Looking at the
would be
clerks.
proposing, I think, is to remove from property
From 6
to 14.
Okay. Julie?
Through the mayor, is simply, Councillor Wright, I believe what you're doing is moving a amended motion from what staff proposed that in effect removes those shown on the screen with the strike through. Yeah, so it's not a deferral, it's just an amended motion.
Amended motion, yeah, that's right.
Okay. Questions from or comments from other members of council on this? Councillor Hanmer and then Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. Through you, I understand needing more time. I'm a little concerned that we're advantaging the commercial property owners from an incentive program. So I'm just curious why the entire list wasn't included.
So staff can speak to this probably more effectively than me, but in their outreach to these properties, the residential properties were more receptive to it than the commercial properties. There's a lot of misinformation and perception that there's a lot of red tape involved in heritage designations. And so I think we need to do more outreach with that sector of the designated list.
Okay. Through you, my concern was that you tied it to the incentive program. And so as long as we're continuing to be open of what the incentive program is and everyone's eligible for it, it just seems a little unnerving for me, given that we've got the recommendation number 3 is looking at the financial incentive program. So why wouldn't the homeowners of 1 to 5 be able to have input on that? I can appreciate they may understand the heritage designation more, but we're just creating a two-part system.
Yeah, I can appreciate that too. I just think that where the greatest misperception is around the benefits is really within the property owner class, and that's where most of the outreach to the stakeholder community needs to happen. I think it would be great, actually, if we had the full set of incentives as we're embarking on this work. I think that would be ideal. However, in the context of how we're working and the timelines, there's a concurrent kind of approach I think that staff have taken, but they can answer more effectively than I can.
Yeah, I was gonna just, if I could, I think Mr. Lauder has some information to add to this.
Sure, if I could, to council, properties 1 to 5, we did receive pretty clear support in writing for the NOIDs, the notices of intention to designate for those properties. And for a number of the other properties that are struck out on the screen here, on Friday, this last Friday, as well as in one case today, we did receive letters from the property owners wishing to have the process deferred for their property. So late, probably later than we would have liked it, given that we had been working with those landowners for a number of months. But at the end of the day, the letters did come in for some of those struck out properties that had that request. So just to sum up, properties 1 to 5, they were pretty clear in their support and have maintained that support.
We've got written confirmation from all 5, 1 to 5, that they want to proceed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Would it be helpful for you if, like, we added a bit more language to indicate that even though they're not deferred, or if they are, like, if the case is that they're deferred, that they would still be eligible for the financial
Well,
incentives?
it's not so much being eligible, that they would continue to be considered as part of the consultation process as the incentive programs are developed. So they're not adversely affected by the fact that we've gone ahead with them today.
Yeah, my apologies. I should have addressed that when I had the microphone earlier. Yes, they will continue to be eligible. All property owners on this list, the others that might be looked at in the future, other designated properties that exist today that aren't part of this discussion would benefit from any financial incentives should council wish to move forward on financial incentives in the future. So from my perspective, it doesn't really cue anyone differently. It really, properties 6 to 14, what it does is council wouldn't be issuing the notices of intention to designate today, and staff would come back at a later date with consideration for those properties. But financial incentives would still benefit all of them.
Okay. Then if
And
I
you had a
might just,
follow-up?
yeah, one final question around recommendation number 3. You're reviewing the financial incentive program, but there isn't a closing the loop back to us of what the incentive program's going to be and what might be it will entail.
Yes, that is correct. And so what Mr. Simpson had indicated is we would report back at a later date on item 3, and we're really going to do a bit of a best practice review. We do have a sense of some of the incentives, as I outlined a couple of minutes ago. So we will bring a future report back to council on financial incentives. We want to do some internal work with our friends from finance, for example, as well as all property owners of heritage buildings, and bring something back for council for consideration.
Thank you, and I appreciate that time is of the essence given the legislation and the clock that we're working with, so thank you.
So would you anticipate that you would report back in 2025, like by June, by September?
Could we say 2025? I like
Okay,
2025.
I'll look to Councillor Hanmer.
We certainly wish to move quickly, yes.
2025 I will take.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rowe. Oh, okay, Councillor Bassick.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. Okay, through you, Mayor. So my question picks up on Councillor Hanmer's last comment about the timeline. Being cognizant the timeline has changed here. First, it was much sooner, then it was later. We're in an election. Who knows when the legislation will, if they'll revisit the timelines of the legislation. So I guess my potential, I think the idea is really great. I also think that there's so much unpredictability with all the legislation that's come forward in the last 3 years that I'd be concerned that that timeline would change again. And then these deferrals might risk putting out the notice of intention to designate at all, and then we miss these properties. So I'm curious what we can do to mitigate that potential.
Can you just clarify that this bill is passed and is received like this bill's in place and it's received royal assent. So do you anticipate, I guess the question is, do you anticipate when the provincial government returns, whichever government it is, do you anticipate them revisiting this? Wondering, Council?
Well, sure, that's fair. I actually didn't really know where the legislation was, or royal assent or whatever. But yes, my question is, could the timelines change again? I think they understand. Could the timelines change again? And if they were, would deferring these properties by any chance risk putting out a notice of intention to designate?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you knew that like this legislation's already in place. It's received royal assent.
And then I guess I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to whether
Yeah.
that means if timelines can change if legislation has already passed. Just a gap in my provincial legislation knowledge.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Through the mayor to Councillor Vasic. So the legislation that's in effect right now is Bill 23 is imposing these changes to address listed properties. Bill 200 extended that deadline by 2 years. So all those bills have received royal assent and they're in effect. But that isn't to say that the province could pass another bill making some other changes to the heritage processes. I know the province is already looking at overhauling the entire heritage process. So staff's initial position right now is to, at least we were abiding by Bill 23 and addressing our listed properties. That was our main goal, and we are looking towards that 2025 deadline initially. So we have a bit more breathing room now, but with that breathing room, we are also hoping to look at the rest of our listed properties. So time is of the essence for designating properties and why we've brought them to council today. But we also do want to look at financial incentives along with that, understanding those benefits to homeowners. But the priority initially is to designate properties. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think the amended motion makes sense. I guess I'm flagging that as a concern if there were some surprise to come. And those timelines might be upped again, that staff are mindful that you might need to come back to council to be like, oh no,
And that can happen, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Broadley.
Excuse me, thank you through Mayor McCabe. Maybe I'm just to the point of pulling these here, I'm gonna go back to Appendix B of our report, speaks to this designation flow chart. And maybe I'm gonna ask a question or make a comment and have you correct me where I'm incorrect. So that, as of today, if we issue these NOIDs and one of our developer friends or property owner friends wants to avoid the NOID, to go back to the 90s Domino's Pizza reference there for anybody who remembers that, they have 30 days to, after they've received this, to basically question it. And then we have 90 days to make a decision on their, objection. And if we say no, then it goes through a whole process that could take forever, and it's a whole legal process, OLT, et cetera, et cetera. So if we were to issue these NOIDs, yeah, thank you. If we were to issue these NOIDs today and property owners were in opposition to it and objected to it, we have about 120 days to maybe sort this out and get them on side. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. Those timelines are correct. Once we issue the notice of intent to designate, owners have 30 days to send us a letter saying why they object to it. They have to list all their reasons and facts. And then we, staff, would bring a recommendation to council whether we would want to honor that objection and withdraw our notice of intention to designate. Or we can dismiss that objection and proceed towards the designation bylaw. Then the owner has the right to appeal that bylaw to the OLT. The natures of the objection, though, would have to be regarding the cultural heritage value. It would have to be if we made some error in law or error in identifying heritage attributes of the building. Say, for instance, they have conclusive evidence that such individual did not have their business at that building, they could appeal that to the OLT. But from my understanding, appeals cannot be on the ground of, I don't want this.
Right, so that leads me to my second question. My follow-up through you, Mayor, is, not being a heritage expert myself, having read through the report and having listened to your presentation today, I don't get the impression that staff are suggesting that there's any situation in which we would not ultimately issue these notices of intent to designate. We are eminently confident in the logic and research, et cetera, that went into these. And so if I'm understanding Councillor Wright's proposal here, this is maybe giving us a little bit of extra time before we ultimately issue these NOIDs to try and get these property owners on side so that we can avoid some of the hairiness of the right quadrant, right half of this flow chart that we see in front of us. And maybe that's a question for
I
Councillor
was
Wright.
going to say, I think that might be a better question for Councillor Wright to answer.
That is exactly what we are trying to avoid here. It's just really good stakeholder relations to ensure that we have done the best job that we possibly can to communicate the benefits and to better understand those benefits as a suite of options.
Yep, perfect. And for me, I'm happy to support that amendment because I think that doesn't suggest to these property owners that we're budging on what we're intending to do ultimately at the end of the day. So I'm happy to second it, yes. Yeah, that we ultimately still intend to issue these things, but we're giving some time for improved stakeholder engagement for a period of time. Again, so we can potentially avoid those. And again, also ultimately, if a developer comes forward or property owner comes forward and shows us that we're wrong in our assessment here, then so be it. We'll follow that path as it goes. So yeah, happy to second it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bodley. And I know Councillor Wright had, in a couple of meetings that we've had, you had expressed sort of starting with that point, right? Like starting with the consultation and the engagement and the education of the property owners so that they see the upside of it, not so that it, but anyway, the process is the way the process is rolled out, but take your point that using the carrot versus the stick is probably a lot quicker and cleaner ultimately. Okay, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I was going to second the motion, but Councillor Bodley jumped to that first. Anyway, I just wanted to say I do support the motion for the reasons explained by Councillor Wright, but I also wanted to recognize the work that staff have done, Dominic and Adam and everyone, and the one-to-one engagement. I think this was a surprise, as we all know on Friday. It wasn't the direction we understood things were going, so I think that this is a positive direction, and again, building those relationships and having those commercial properties better understand the possibilities is great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And before we move to a vote, I do have a question about, we had received an email from a resident a week or two ago when this first was published about 115 Park Street. So I want to ask on behalf of this resident, 115 Park Street, they said it's the birthplace and childhood home of Dr. C. Miller Fisher. And this is, I'm lifting this from the resident who emailed me, arguably one of Waterloo's most distinguished citizens of the 20th century. And they had provided a bit of background about who this person was. So it sounded like it was more about the person who lived there, maybe, I don't know, but I'm not a heritage expert, but about the brick and beam of the building itself. So just wanted to ask if you had considered, notable figures, if that's a heritage designation, like the place in which someone like, a notable figure from Waterloo lived. Like, will all of our houses be determined? No, I'm just joking. Just joking. No, but this resident is wondering specifically about 115 Park Street.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor. So staff are looking into that property and its association with that individual. Whatever we can come back with, if that information is accurate, there's opportunities for commemorating that individual. But to the question, I believe, was if we can designate a property, if there was some person that lived there, was that the question?
Well, yeah, I mean, this person is wondering, I mean, about the building itself, but also the person who lived there. Is it possible for, or have you considered this in the process that you've undertaken? Like
Right.
designating it because of the person who's in there?
So this property, 115 Park Street, is not included in our review. It has not been on our radar through this project. But a property can be designated if it has an association with an important individual. Many of the properties here today have an association with like the Seagram family or the Bauer family, for instance. And those are important features to recognize when designating heritage.
So how would someone like this resident, or just generally, how would someone, like, are you working with the museum to identify where sort of notable Waterloo residents? And I guess that's an open question of who's a notable Waterloo resident. Like, how does that process play out then?
Absolutely. So through the mayor, there's many avenues that you could look into this matter. There's historic documents of who lived on a property. There's a number of avenues through the library, the museum. Enlisting the knowledge of our heritage committee is a key one as well. So yeah, there's many.
So should this resident maybe just contact the heritage committee? Would that be the best?
Well, the resident's
advice?
email has got to staff, and we're
Has
looking
it?
into the
Okay.
matter. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor with, to defer item amended as presented, moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Bodley. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, and Hayden for the work on this file. Okay, so moving now, it's going to a motion that I tabled about U.S. proposed tariff response. I'm actually going to ask Councillor Wright as the acting mayor to chair from here on.
Thank you. I will take on the chair duties. So I just want to know, Mayor, if you would like to speak before or after the delegation, because we do have a delegation.
I'll speak first. Thanks very much. And as you know, sometimes when I speak, I'm not brief, so I do offer my. But this is really an important issue. So, we are all aware of what's coming, what's emanating from our neighbor our neighbor to the south since the new U.S. administration took office. And I'm not going to repeat the disrespectful threats and insults that have been particularly directed at our Prime Minister and also to all Canadians. However, we do need to respond. The response from Canadians to the noise coming from the U.S. administration, I think, has been really positive generally and uplifting, and particularly across Waterloo. I've been really encouraged by the Canadian flags that I've seen sprouting from snowbanks, flowing from hockey sticks stuck in snowbanks and on front porches and back decks, and even a snow sculpture on William Street that is topped with a maple leaf. So I want to say thanks to everybody who is showing their Canadian pride in our community. Particularly that started on Flag Day. But it really was a strong response, I think, overall from Waterloo and from communities across Canada to say that Canada is a sovereign nation and we will remain a sovereign nation. But having said that, staff and council fully understand that the threats emanating from the new U.S. administration are causing a tremendous amount of uncertainty and stress for everyone in our community, but especially our business community in particular. And again, that's in Waterloo region, across the province, and certainly across our country. And the uncertainty is particularly challenging. However, I'd want to share that on Friday, just this past Friday, I participated in a meeting with other heads of council from across Waterloo region, and amongst other things we discussed, I walked away with a very helpful reminder, and that is as difficult and challenging as it is right now, particularly for our business community, the reminder that was given was that these threats are a negotiating tactic, and that despite the tremendous amount of executive orders being signed, these are not actually legislation. They are thoughts he's sending out into the universe, but they are not legislation. We need to be very alive to the challenge and to the new reality that the U.S. administration is certainly not the same as any of the past administrations. And there's no question of our very long-standing relationship with the U.S. has been, I think, fundamentally damaged. And there's no question that we need to respond. Collaboration and coordination are required, and I'm happy that this is what is occurring with municipalities across the province, across the country, and across our region. And I want to assure the community that the community knows that the region and our city, as well as municipal associations, are working together in a number of ways. So to start, there's motions like this that are being passed across the country. And while we already know that the city sources through our procurement processes, we source as much services and products that we need for our operations. We already source those from local vendors as much as possible, but staff are already examining what changes may be possible. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, two of our main municipal associations, will have advice later this week regarding potential impacts to existing trade agreements and other opportunities that may allow municipalities to procure more Canadian goods. So stay tuned on that front. FCM and AMO are in regular and direct contact with our federal offices, Global Affairs Canada in particular, and are providing input on specific trade and tariff options. And municipalities, like our provincial and federal counterparts, we are all using our voices on both sides of the border to be clear that tariffs and the trade war will be very damaging to citizens, to communities, and to businesses in the U.S. as well as in Canada. But we also know that this war of words coming out of the U.S. administration will continue. And while we will have to continue to navigate this difficult period, we must take steps to ensure a stronger Canada emerges from this crisis. And in my mind, that means prioritizing economic diversification. And we know that we have 50 other trade agreements with 50 other countries. And you know, to our business communities, we're going to look for ways to support them as they need to start looking for other trade partners. We need to break down the interprovincial trade barriers that are stifling economic opportunity. We need to prioritize trade-enabling infrastructure like ports and roads and bridges. And we need to recognize that real economic growth is built by investing in communities like Waterloo. And the prosperity of our communities now and into the future is critical. In this time of economic uncertainty, mayors, councils, and municipal associations continue to call all orders of government to accelerate and increase investment in growth, sustaining infrastructure. And by that I mean water systems, roads, public transit, arts and culture facilities, affordable housing, and of course adaptation to climate change. This is a good opportunity to invest in our local communities. And so at the City of Waterloo, we will continue to consult with our local business community and beyond to understand how, where, and when we can support them. I know our economic development staff have been meeting with and talking to our local business owners and leaders to understand what's happening on the ground. And we've also had input from our Waterloo Economic Development Advisory Committee in 2 separate meetings that we've already held. The community will also soon have access, I think it's this week, to a new webpage that will provide information for our local business community for options of how they can, where they can find information, and as this process continues, we'll continue to add information to that webpage, because again, having this information is part of the challenge, because the uncertainty is what's really difficult in this. So I appreciate the work that economic development is doing to support local business community in real time. So like everyone here, we hope that these trade threats do not materialize, but we also know that we will do what we can and what we need to do to support our entire community now, in the coming months, and as these negotiations continue. So with that, I will look for a seconder for this motion. Thank you, Councillor Hanmer.
We do have a registered delegate And so I'd like to invite the delegate to come to the podium. It is a 10-minute speaking slot, and so if you would just state your name and your city of residence, then you have 10 minutes.
Mayor and members of council, my name is Craig Sloss, my pronouns are he and him, and I live in Uptown Waterloo. I'm broadly supportive of the motion on the response to the U.S. tariff threats. I'm here today to encourage you to broaden the scope of the 6th clause in the resolution. The proposed review of procurement processes should also include a review of the city's communication policies as they relate to use of U.S. social media platforms. Before I begin, I should disclose that I'm a volunteer with a group that runs 2 community-led alternative social media platforms, but I'm not here to advocate that the city use those specific platforms, just that the city explore its social media options. I'd like to echo the mayor's comments from the February 10 meeting, recognizing the close ties between our region and the U.S. through businesses and dual citizenship. To that, I'd like to add that our dispute is not with the American people, but with their government. Many U.S. residents oppose what their government is doing, and we will need their support to pressure their government to put an end to the tariff threat. As we reduce our reliance on American sources of goods and services, I think it's important that these efforts focus on reducing reliance specifically on companies that have close ties with the U.S. government or specific individuals within the U.S. government. Use of U.S. social media platforms is widespread across all levels of Canadian government, so this is not just a City of Waterloo concern. In fact, I just noticed in my email as I was sitting there, came through some breaking news on the record. There's a headline that says that the City of Cambridge has just decided to stop using Twitter. So when opportunities arise, I hope you'll also share these concerns with your colleagues in other municipalities or at other levels of government. Now, when the city posts on a social media platform, it's providing free content to the platform, and it also increases traffic to the platform when residents use the platform to access the information posted by the city. Even if it's free to post, the city is generating advertising revenue for the platform. Council meeting pages on the city's website contain links encouraging people to share the page on Twitter and Facebook. In the current social media environment, are these really the platforms that the city should be promoting? My first recommendation is that council should direct staff to review the city's use of U.S. social media platforms and recommend alternatives that allow us to move away from platforms that are directly or indirectly influenced by the U.S. government. With U.S. companies dominating the social media landscape, I don't think that the city will be able to avoid them entirely, but some platforms are worse than others. As of January 20 of this year, Twitter is now directly owned and controlled by a U.S. government official. The same can be said of Truth Social, which is generally not taken seriously as a social media platform, so I won't comment on that one further. Meta's platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, do not have direct operational connections to the U.S. government, but have recently made a number of changes to appease the current U.S. administration. Meta has removed independent fact-checkers, which will open up Facebook, Instagram, and Threads to a flood of disinformation and propaganda. Another change allows Meta's platforms to be used to allege that members of the LGBTQ+ community are mentally ill, an insult both to members of the queer community and to individuals with legitimate mental health concerns. On the other hand, Blue Sky, despite being a U.S. company, does not appear to be under direct or indirect influence of the U.S. government. And anecdotally, I'll say that when I've seen local users leave Twitter, they usually announce that they are joining Blue Sky. However, for a truly made in Canada solution, the city could join a Mastodon server hosted in Canada, or even host its own Mastodon server that would connect to the rest of the Mastodon network. Now, Twitter is the worst of the platforms currently in use by the city, so I'll focus on explaining its problems in detail. As I alluded to earlier, Twitter is controlled by an official in a foreign government that has repeatedly threatened Canada with annexation. Even if we were comfortable with that risk, there's little benefit to continuing to use Twitter. It's just not an effective way to get messages out anymore. Even at its peak, Twitter had far fewer users than its competitors. Mashable has reported that Twitter has lost tens of millions of daily active users following the change in ownership. Anecdotally, before I left Twitter, I saw many of my local contacts also announce that they were leaving to other platforms. That being said, I've had politically active friends tell me that they would like to leave Twitter but won't because Twitter is where the politicians are. One argument I've heard in favor of staying on Twitter is that we need to be there to counter disinformation, especially since we need to maintain public support for our response to the tariffs. But Twitter just won't be an effective place to do this. For years, we've known that foreign governments have been able to carry out propaganda campaigns by manipulating social media, the most famous incident being the Russian government's interference in the 2016 US elections. The Russian government was able to carry out this attack even though they did not control the affected platforms. This type of threat is obviously magnified when foreign government officials have direct control over the platform. Twitter relies on an AI-based algorithm to prioritize tweets that appear in a user's feed. Business Insider and The Guardian have reported that Twitter's owner has demonstrated a willingness and capability to manipulate Twitter's algorithm to prioritize his own posts in users' feeds. In another incident, a Vancouver business responded to US threats to annex Canada by posting the message, "Forever neighbors, never neighbors," on Twitter, playing on the differences in the spelling of the word neighbors. The CBC reported that this post was censored by Twitter and the business's account was suspended. Even the mildest criticism of the US government got censored on Twitter. We're not going to win a public relations war on platforms that prioritize the position of the US government. My second recommendation is to encourage you, as individual councillors, to carefully consider the appropriateness of the social media platforms that you choose in your official capacities. This could either be something you do informally as an individual decision, or it could be something that you formalize by adding a section on social media usage to the Council Code of Conduct. I've noticed that a few of you, since January 20, have stopped posting on Twitter, and I'd encourage the rest of you to also move on to other platforms. And I want to acknowledge that this won't be easy. I think what makes it so difficult for politicians to move away from Twitter is that years ago, Twitter was a truly effective way of providing a way for residents to directly engage with their elected officials. We even have a local success story of this kind of engagement. A Kitchener resident tweeted an idea to pedestrianize Gaukel Street to the mayor of Kitchener, who publicly agreed with the idea. The resident followed up with the mayor, which led to discussions with Kitchener City staff, which culminated in the creation of Gaukel Block, which is now a beloved outdoor event venue. But we have to come to the terms with the fact that the Twitter we once knew no longer exists. By the way, the resident who tweeted about Gaukel Street has since left Twitter, deleted all his tweets from the platform, rehosted an archive of his tweets on his own website, and now actively works to support alternative social media platforms. We need you to help cultivate alternatives that recapture the spirit of direct engagement between elected officials and residents that Twitter used to provide. Social media platforms with weak moderation policies foster a poisoned environment for residents who have characteristics that are protected by the Ontario Human Rights Code. This limits the effectiveness of the platforms as a tool for engaging with residents. On these platforms, you'll only hear from residents who are willing to tolerate such a poisoned environment, biasing the kind of feedback you'll hear. We should be able to engage with elected officials and learn about local events without needing to sift through US government propaganda, falsely claiming that there are only two genders, or disinformation discouraging parents from vaccinating their children.
You have 1 minute, Craig.
I would strongly urge you to limit your social media usage to platforms that enforce robust moderation policies that are broadly consistent with the spirit of the Ontario Human Rights Code, to ensure that all residents have equal opportunities to engage with you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my delegation today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sloss. I'm just going to call on Carrie Van Niekerk to comment on your delegation.
Thank you very much. And sorry, I'm just going to move my microphone so I can speak directly to you. Hopefully you could, I'm here. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Sloss. We really appreciate that. And a number of the concerns you raised have also been raised by city staff. We are beginning to look at our use of social media platforms. We are concerned about content management, who's running the platforms, a number of the things that you raised, and we're also examining what potential alternate social media platforms there are available. We will be beginning an education campaign later this week about all the ways that residents can stay informed on city programs and services that don't involve social media at all. So promoting our e-newsletters, signing up for alerts on our website. We've been waiting. We just relaunched today an updated Engage platform across the region of Waterloo. So staff have been heavily involved in that process and are just now beginning to turn their attention to social media. We are also involved through the Laurier City Hub program. We're working with a number of Laurier students to examine communications and new media sort of in a general topic. So branching out beyond just social media to see what other options our local students might come up with as well to help us look at the future of communications at the city. So really appreciate all of the information. And if you have a copy of what you presented, I'd welcome receiving it so I don't miss anything.
Yes, I can certainly share that, and I'm very happy to hear that that direction you've provided, and I'll be happy to say that I have just given you some very public feedback in favor of that direction.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and we have a seconded.
Yes, I just want to make a comment.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask council whether they had further comments. So go ahead, councillor.
Thank you. Mine was actually through you, Chair, to the delegate, an apology. I was laughing, and I was not laughing at you. I really appreciated your presentation and your information. I was challenging the mayor because she's not chairing right at the moment. And she gave you the 1 minute warning. So please, I didn't want you to leave thinking your delegation was not important. It was very important. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I did figure that out, actually.
Are there any other comments? I'll circle back to you, Mayor, so that you can have the last word. Councillor Vasek.
Thanks, through you, Chair Wright. Thanks so much, Craig. I think about this a lot. And there's a lot of reasons why I think about it, because I think there's a lot of examples of when you're on these platforms and you learn things passively, but you also engage in this back and forth, whether it's through DMs or publicly on whatever, on the feed. And that's led to some things that have happened at council here as well, or asking staff questions. And so being on social media platforms has certainly enhanced my experience and made me hopefully improve my work. One of the things I struggle with about moving to new platforms, particularly now, and abandoning the ones that I'm on right away, is, one, quite practically, I don't have the time to update, and I've really stopped updating a lot on various platforms other than Instagram, because as terrible as Meta has been around to us LGBTQ matters, which leads to death and suicide, and so it is very serious. Locally, I'm connected to so many residents, and people are also passively receiving retweets or information that I post, which is certainly less this term than it was last term, just based on circumstance for me. And people say, oh, I saw your post about this, but I don't even know that because they haven't liked it or commented on it. And I see part of my role as I'm getting to my question. I just want to give you the reason behind it. Part of my role as a counselor is to let people know about what's happening in the community so they can get involved. So you could counter that by saying, but you're not posting every single thing. So they aren't finding out about everything. To which I would respond, yes, of course, that's true, but they still see that you're active, so they know they can reach out to you if they have a specific question. So I guess I'm curious for your perspective on the transition, because I think there needs to be a transition. And then kind of at what point, and I've seen you do the transition on Instagram and how you're letting people know, so that's part of it. But if you have any other ideas and suggestions for us who do want to transition to more ethical platforms, how we might do that without abandoning our local work as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'd say the problem that we're trying to circumvent is this chicken and egg. I don't think is the right metaphor, but the problem is no one wants to go to the new platforms because no one's there yet, so no one goes to the new platforms, right? And the way I've been managing it as on my own social media usage, as you've alluded to, is I've done a gradual migration where I'll use both platforms for a period of time. And to your point about not having enough time to really post effectively on multiple platforms, what I've tended to do is designate my new platform as, and make sure people know that that's my primary platform. But what I'll do is that whenever I post something, I would cross-post it to the older platform so that that information still gets out there. I know that there are automated tools that can also help with this, though I haven't personally used them, so I'm not too familiar with them.
Are there any other questions from council at this time? Okay, we'll circle back to you now, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And just to say thank you very much, Craig, for your thoughtful presentation. You've come in a number of times and always have really good information to share, so I appreciate you continuing to follow what's happening at local council as well as beyond. And just to let you, I mean, from my perspective as the person who tabled this motion, because of the response that our Director of Communications gave, I don't feel that we need to amend the motion. So just wanted to explain that to you, but I hope you're comfortable that we are taking a look at it, and we'll continue to work with staff and as council, we've heard what you've had to say, and we'll continue to look into it and work on the social media policy that we have. I know personally I moved off of Twitter, I think it was about September. Like, I just thought it's not helpful anymore, and so did move to Blue Sky and some other platforms, but yeah, so follow me on Blue Sky, anyone who's listening. And just also to your point, I should have included in my earlier remarks that this isn't directed at U.S. businesses and certainly U.S. citizens that live in our community. Absolutely not. It's direct. These motions are directly about the U.S. administration and how objectionable they are being to cities like Waterloo and people who live here and live across Canada. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.
And if that concludes our comments on this, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried.
Okay, I will resume the chair now. Apologies for that, Councillor Wright. You get so carried away in this chair. It's like just joking. Okay, so we have no other notices of motion. We have no communications and correspondence. We have no unfinished business. Questions, Council. Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a few minutes to thank IPPW staff and our parks team for all the snow removal efforts that have been happening over the last few weeks of the summer or winter adventure we've had. Sorry. I've had some questions, and I was hoping that maybe it's something that communications can help with, or Mr. Henderson's team. But one of the questions was with regard to the height of the snow piles right now, and people are having trouble seeing around them. So I wasn't sure what the status was on that, and how and when we bring those down. So that was the one. Another one was with regard to clearance of snow on catch basins, because we're starting to get some melt and people are seeing water build up at the base of driveways, which will obviously create ice issues in near future if we have a deep freeze. And then the last question was with regard to snow removal at fire hydrants and whose responsibility that resides with to take those out. I don't know whether, Bob, you wanted to respond right now or later, but
Do you have anything, are you able to respond right now, Bob, or Commissioner Ormston?
it wasn't my intention to put you in the hot seat. I just.
But certainly, staff have been doing a great job clearing the snow. Thank you.
Yes, it's certainly been a challenge. As you know, we've got a team that snow plows, and when they're not snow plowing, when they're not in the plows, they'll be out doing other exercises. And snow loading, getting rid of snowbanks is one of those exercises. So we've pivoted from snow plowing to snow loading, removing snowbanks. We developed a plan and a priority listing of addressing these snowbanks throughout the city. Obviously, there's snowbanks throughout the whole city, so we need to prioritize the removal of those snowbanks that are causing sightlines. Our priorities exist on like clearing LRT, regional roads, city arterials, the main arteries throughout the city. We're prioritizing school zones. You may have seen that we're already removed snowbanks from school zones to make it safer for kids disembarking and getting on buses. So that we're making our way through that list. You can see that we're removing snowbanks in uptown Waterloo, King Street. We really need to go through this entire city to do that. It's not an easy exercise to do. It's a slow-moving exercise. It's very laborious. So we're getting through the city and priority. As for catch basins, I was talking with our colleague, Mr. Lee McDermott over there, about going through the entire city, looking for spots to clear catch basins so that avoid snow loading, flooding. And just the last question was about
Fire hydrants.
yes, fire hydrants. It's come up in the media, and we've been addressing that by requesting that residents help out. Fire is not necessarily their responsibility to clear fire hydrants, but fire services, as I understand it, go around with staff identifying locations where fire hydrants are obstructed and taking actions to clear those fire hydrants.
Okay, that's really great. I appreciate it. And if any, like to Carrie, I guess, if there's opportunities to kind of communicate and encourage people to give us a hand with some of this stuff. Yeah.
Carrie, did you want to, Carrie and
I
then
can
Lee.
respond briefly.
Okay.
So we have been trying to get some of those messages out publicly. We had some great coverage about our fire services crews who were out last week digging out hydrants, and with 2,600 of them across the city, it's a big process. I just got a note from staff. We have catch basin messaging queued up to run this week. So again, we'll be asking for some assistance there, letting residents know about the importance of it. And we've got some great footage of, plow staff, as well our sidewalk clearing crews. When they switch to the blowers from the plows for the sheer amount of snow, it just slows everything down. So we've been trying to share some photos, some videos as much as we can to get the word out.
Thank you.
And we'll continue.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks. Thank
I
you
think
very
Lee
much.
wanted to, did you want to add to that, Lee?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, we have our storm crews, as Bob mentioned. We're now on a high priority list of response for all the catch basins and grates across the city. And today we were coordinating with fire services on what they're doing with the hydrants and what we're doing. So we have our crews out doing hydrants as well. So it's, pretty much, we have 3 different divisions, transportation, CU, and fire services. Big thanks to Chief and the fire staff, because that's really helpful with the sheer amount of snow that we've seen.
Thanks for that information, and thanks for the question. And just reminder to people, if you can do what you can to keep your own stormwater drains clear, it's really, really valuable. Other questions, comments? I have sorry, did you have a question? No, I have a question just around, I will add just on the emergency preparedness, because when there's snow that comes down like that, just a reminder that I think the rule of thumb for emergency preparedness is that you should have about 72 hours worth of provisions in your home, so that to lessen the need for you to go out into the community when there's heavy snow like that. So just a reminder to anyone listening to keep at least 72 hours worth of goods in your home. My question, switching topics, is just, and I'm not sure who to direct it to, so, but it's about those old newspaper and real estate boxes. I've been getting these are sort of spotted throughout the city. I have a couple of residents who are kind of constantly messaging me saying, I still see them there, I still see them there. And I have reached out to Cornerstone, the Real Estate Association, I forget their name, the Cornerstone Real Estate Association. Some of them are their responsibilities, but there still are other boxes that don't seem to be anybody exists anymore to remove them. Is there anything that prevents us from just, except I know that it would take staff time, but is there a process there where we can cut the chains that are holding them to standards, or sorry, light standards, and get rid of these in neighborhoods? Okay.
But anyways, we don't necessarily have an active program reviewing these, but it's within our purview to do so.
Okay, so is it helpful if we send you like where we know they are? I mean, I don't know how many they are, and I know we need to be careful about how many emails we send staff, but okay.
I've directed our staff, if they do see these, I'll call it deteriorating real estate boxes or newspaper boxes, to remove them. We try to contact the owners first and request that they remove them, but any information you can share with us, we'll certainly take an act on it.
Okay, that's great to know. And one of the ones, at one location, there was two of these. One was a real estate box, and one was I think a former Toronto Star. So the Metroland went out and removed one, but said the other wasn't theirs. So anyway, okay, thanks for that. I'm glad I asked. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, okay. New business. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to highlight that the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery is hosting their annual tea fundraiser, and it is really lovely. Councillor Freeman and I were there yesterday, and we had a lovely afternoon. And I just wanted to mention that they also have two more coming up, one on Sunday, March 16th, and one on Sunday, May 11th for Mother's Day. So I highly recommend anyone who would like to attend to please do so. It is a lovely day, and it is raising money for a wonderful national gallery that's here in Waterloo.
Yeah, the only national gallery in our city. Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Other comments or questions from anyone? Councillor Wright.
I just want to, through you, Mayor, highlight that the coldest night of the year walk happened on Saturday evening, and it was not the coldest night of the year by a long stretch. However, their fundraising efforts were extraordinary. They raised 106% of their goal, which is tremendous, and just a sign of how much attention our community is paying to the homelessness crisis that we are facing. And just encouraging everybody to continue supporting SHOW and our other housing providers. It's just amazing what the community is doing together.
Waterloo showed up for SHOW on the weekend. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll just remind people that there's a provincial election going on, and that municipal priorities are, obviously we think these are really important. You can go to voteonqualityoflife.ca to see municipalities' top 3 priorities. So The last day to vote is Thursday, February 27th. Please go and visit elections.on.ca if you don't know where your polling station is, but also check out voteonqualityoflife.ca. Okay. And so we'll move to the enactment of the bylaws. I need a mover. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Roach. All in favor? That is carried. Adjournment. Moved by Councillor Vasek, seconded by Councillor Freeman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Council, and have a great evening, everyone.